$2,030 for one slot. That's the price of the cheapest ticket to the 2026 World Cup final. Not for the best seat or the VIP box, but the least one available after FIFA's new pricing system got done with it. To put that in perspective, 4 years ago in Qatar, the same ticket cost around $200. So between 2022 and 2026, the entry price to watch the biggest match in football multiplied by 10. And that number alone doesn't tell the full story, because by the time flights, hotels, and getting to the stadium are factored in, a fan following their team from the group stage to the final is looking at somewhere between $18,000 and $31,000. That's for one person attending one tournament. So how did football's most watched event become something most football fans can't afford to attend? Let's find out. Ticket prices at World Cups have never been cheap. But for most of the tournament's modern history, they followed a logic that made sense. Prices went up and down, depending on the host country, and generally reflected what fans in that part of the world could reasonably spend. In Germany 2006, a group stage ticket started at $55. In South Africa 2010, that dropped to $20. Partly because FIFA wanted the stadiums full in a market where spending power was lower. Brazil 2014 and Russia 2018 saw prices climb again. And then Qatar brought them back to something more measured. The final in Qatar cost around $200 for the cheapest category. For a tournament held in one of the wealthiest countries on earth, that was considered steep, but not absurd. People paid and the stadiums were filled. Now look at the 2026 group stage. The base price for the cheapest ticket is $150. That's more than double what it was 4 years ago. For the quarterfinals, it's $725, which is almost 4 times Qatar. And the final, before dynamic pricing gets involved, starts at $2,790. Obviously, something changed, and it wasn't just inflation. To understand what happened with tickets, let's look at how FIFA funds itself. Between 2019 and 2022, FIFA generated $7.57 billion. Out of that, 83% came from the Qatar World Cup alone. A single 29-day tournament carried 4 years of operations for the entire organization. Within the tournament, broadcast rights were the engine. Nearly $2.9 billion, close to 50% of total revenue, came from television deals, which makes sense. FIFA's own figures put the Qatar viewership at close to 5 billion people, roughly 60% of the global population. Broadcasters will pay almost anything to be part of that. Then sponsors contributed about $1.8 billion, another 28%. Companies like Coca-Cola, Visa, and Adidas have been long-term FIFA partners. Others pay specifically for one tournament, because with that many eyes on the screen, having a logo on the pitch carries enormous commercial value. And ticket sales amounted to $929 million, which is just 15% of the total. Now look at FIFA's projections for 2026. The total revenue is expected to reach $8.9 billion. TV rights remain the biggest piece at 44%. Sponsors have dropped to 20%. But tickets jumped from 15% to 34% of total revenue. In absolute terms, from $929 million to $3 billion. That's more than triple. More games are being played this time. 104 instead of 64. So naturally, more tickets are available. But a 300% increase in revenue from tickets isn't explained by 40 extra matches alone. Two things drove it, and they worked together. The first factor is the base rates. FIFA's explanation points to the scale of organizing the tournament across 3 countries. The total operational budget rose from $1.8 billion in 2022 to $3.7 billion in 2026. That's a real cost increase, and some of it does land on ticket pricing, but it doesn't account for increases of 300% to 400% across categories. The second factor does most of the remaining work. Since 2002, FIFA's ticketing system has worked the same way. Fans register, a lottery is held, and whatever price a ticket was listed at, that's what it stayed. However, for 2026, that changed. FIFA introduced dynamic pricing, the same model airlines and hotels use, where prices shift with demand. The moment the group stage fixtures dropped, it became very clear what that meant in practice. Before matchups were known, a ticket to the June 27th game at Hard Rock Stadium was $400. Within hours, the same ticket crossed $2,000. The final went the same way. When the US, Canada, and Mexico originally bid to host the tournament, FIFA promised a seat at the final that would cost no more than $1,550. By April 2026, the cheapest standard final ticket had reached $5,785. The most expensive seats hit $10,990 and later tripled. With the tournament 2 days away, 180,000 tickets were still unsold. FIFA argues that fans were already paying these prices through third-party resale platforms. The difference now is that the money comes back into the system rather than going to resellers. They even built an official resale platform to capture it, charging 15% from the buyer and 15% from the seller on every transaction. How convenient, isn't it? But here's where it gets genuinely hard to defend. On that very platform, someone listed a single ticket for the final for $11.5 million.
What happened is, today we were looking on FIFA's official resale platform for people who have World Cup tickets and want to resell those tickets. And what we found was one ticket which was for sale for $11.5 million.
For one ticket, and it's not even a good one, Block 307, Row 22, Seat 12, behind the goal, right up in the gods. The kind of seat where you need binoculars to confirm it's actually football being played down there. No reasonable person is paying $11.5 million for that ticket. It was probably listed for a laugh or to grab a headline. But the fact that FIFA's own official platform had no cap, no ceiling, nothing stopping someone from typing in any number they felt like, says everything about how seriously the organization is taking this. And FIFA gets a 30% commission if it sells. So if someone actually pressed add to cart on an $11.5 million ticket, FIFA would pocket around $2.5 million from that one transaction. They'd probably send Infantino over with a warm meal. Speaking of which, when Infantino was asked about tickets selling for $2 million on the resale market, he had this to say.
If some people put on a secondary, on a resale market, some tickets for the final at $2 million, number one, it doesn't mean that the tickets cost $2 million. Number two, it doesn't mean that somebody will buy these tickets. Actually, if somebody buys a ticket for the final $2 million, I will personally bring him a hot dog and a Coke to make sure that he has a great experience.
A hot dog and a Coke for paying $2 million? That's the level of concern here. But FIFA isn't the only one making this worse. The scalpers deserve their own mention. Someone buys a ticket in an early sales phase for $1,000, then lists it online for $5,000 the next week. This is completely legal in the US with no restrictions. And because dynamic pricing already pushed primary market prices up, the gap between what a ticket originally cost and what it's being sold for becomes almost impossible to track. For some Category 3 seats, the cheapest sections in the stadium, Prices on the resale market have reached $23,000. We're talking about Category 3 with the worst seats in the building. So the fan who missed the early sales window arrives in a market that has been worked over twice. Once by FIFA's own pricing model, and again by resellers treating World Cup tickets like investment assets. By the time an ordinary supporter gets there, the concept of a fair price has long left the building. And as expected, many fans are not in support of these decisions. But tickets are only one part of the cost. The bigger problem for most fans in 2026 is the distance. In Qatar, the entire World Cup felt like one giant venue. The furthest stadiums were just 55 kilometers apart, meaning fans could watch 2 games in one day. But that changed completely in 2026. The tournament stretches across 3 countries and 16 cities. Vancouver and Miami alone are about 5,600 kilometers apart. That's almost twice the distance from London to Moscow. For some fans, following their team could mean traveling around 16,500 kilometers across 8 cities if they reach the final. Using average bus travel costs, that ground transportation alone could cost about $2,640.
If an Argentina fan was to fly from Buenos Aires to Dallas with a layover in Atlanta to attend the group stage game against Jordan, they'd spend about $3,361, which includes the tickets, the flight, and an average 3-star downtown hotel. I'm a Scotland fan, so I also looked up how much it would be to fly from Edinburgh to Boston to see the team's first game against Haiti. The breakdown is similar. The average group stage game tickets cost a couple of $100 less, but hotels in Boston cost more, driving up the total.
Then there's accommodation. A 39-day tournament could require around $8,970 for a reasonable daily budget covering food, lodging, and local transport. Then add ticket price, estimated around $7,000 for a full run, and a dedicated fan could spend roughly $18,623 before flights and visa costs. Even fan zones are changing. In New Jersey, entry alone costs $12.50. And behind the ticket prices are real fans trying to make impossible choices. Warshihan, a 40-year-old football fan from Northeast India, spent months planning to attend the 2026 World Cup. He wanted to watch England or Portugal, but tickets for those matches started around $450 to $650, and his budget was $350.
The cheapest ticket were like $450 to $650. My budget was like $350. Beyond that, I could not go.
In the end, he bought 2 tickets for Czech Republic versus South Africa at $140 each. Still a huge amount for someone earning about 500 rupees a day, which is roughly $5 to $6.
Very, very careful with our spending here. No more holiday. No more buying new things.
For some fans, the cost is even harder to justify. A ticket to watch Haiti at the World Cup equals nearly 19% of the average annual income per person in the country. Even in larger economies like Brazil and Turkey, it represented a major financial burden.
There's a case for saying that this is the World Cup for the 1%, the 1% who can afford it. If you take a look at the prices that FIFA were charging as little as 10 days ago for Scotland's first match against Haiti, the cheapest ticket was $1,100. The average earnings of an individual in Haiti was $1,035. So it's further indication that FIFA are not interested in the traditional football fan. They believe that they found a new audience.
FIFA responded by introducing $60 tickets, but they make up less than 2% of all available seats. The English FA, for example, received around 4,500 tickets per match, but only 450 were in the cheapest category.
And to reiterate that the starting price is at $60, that the market, everything I said before, the market is here what it is, that if you sell it at a lower price point, And again, this has been part of intense and extensive analysis in this particular market.
Scotland manager Steve Clark called the prices truly scandalous, warning fans not to put themselves into debt just to attend. Supporter groups went further, calling it a betrayal of the World Cup tradition, especially because FIFA's own plans in 2018 promised tickets starting at $21.
The tickets are set, the ticket prices are set by FIFA. My biggest wish is that people don't put themselves into too much debt trying to get there. If you can afford to go, then great. But if you can't afford to go, then understand that don't put yourself and your family into debt. I think that's a big thing for me.
FIFA's defense is simple. This is the biggest World Cup ever. Demand is massive, and the market is showing what people are willing to pay.
Works tirelessly to make sure that we can host the biggest, the best, the greatest, the most inclusive World Cup in the history of FIFA. The biggest event probably in the history of mankind.
The numbers support that because FIFA received hundreds of millions of ticket requests with demand far exceeding supply. 500 million requests for 7 million tickets. Infantino celebrated that publicly, which makes sense. If your job is to sell tickets and not to make sure people can actually afford them. The problem is, high demand does not automatically mean the prices are fair. This results in a tournament that is still open to everyone in theory, but much harder to reach in reality. For decades, the World Cup has been built around ordinary supporters traveling across the world to follow their dreams. Now the question is whether those same supporters are still the people the tournament is designed around. FIFA expects the 2026 World Cup to become the most profitable tournament ever, generating billions in revenue. Good for FIFA. They anticipate that the stadiums will be full and broadcasters will be huge. But behind those numbers are fans like Warchihan, supporters saving for years, and families deciding whether one match is worth breaking the bank. The World Cup has always been expensive. That was part of the challenge. But there is a growing debate over whether the cost has crossed the line from difficult to unreachable. And the biggest question before 2030 is simple. Is FIFA seeing this as a problem to fix? Or is it proof that the system was never about the fans? Like, subscribe, and don't forget to drop your thoughts in the comments below.